And so the first one we're going to look at tonight is child nutrition. And the way we ate as a child certainly influences our health status as an adult. So it's a good place to start. And even though we're not children anymore, it can explain why certain things happened in our body. But it also, and I'm sure each one of us has children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren or nieces or nephews or neighbours that can be helped by what I'm about to show you. Now, for child nutrition, really the time to start is before the couple even conceives. In fact, it is said that we should get on a good diet, clean our body up 2 years before we conceive. But not everyone has the privilege of doing that. In fact, one writer claimed that parents are the genetic engineers of their children. I've got some good news. If it's too late, you've done everything wrong and your children are in their 20s now, genetics may load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. We live in an incredible body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself. And even if we've done everything wrong, when we start to do everything wrong, I'm constantly amazed at how the body starts to revive and recharge. That's the good news. But let's look at how to start. So the lady in pregnancy, I do get messages from mothers that say, what can I eat in pregnancy? I said, what everyone eats. We should, and remember the 3 essential food groups. The 3 essential food groups, no matter who you are fibre. Fibre is essential because it slowly releases the glucose. Fibre is essential because it's in the fibre or parts of plants, and basically plants are where you get your fibre, especially your dark green leafy vegetables, very high in minerals. And minerals literally glue us together. Our bones are made of minerals. Our body's glued together by minerals. So fiber's an essential. Protein. And the best burning fuels in the protein department are legumes, nuts and seeds. And as I mentioned earlier, if you find that legumes cause gas, bring it back, bring it back, bring it right back, even to a teaspoon, until the body goes, yeah, I can handle that. Part of being your own doctor is doing this. You've got to listen. If it doesn't work, don't do it. Adjust, keep adjusting till it works. So it was last May when I was with Jacqueline at a conference, and she said, when we were looking at nuts, she said, I can't eat nuts. So what do I immediately do? Investigate. I was consulting with a man in Melbourne a few years ago. I said, what do you do for a job? He said, I'm a private investigator. I said, so am I. We should all be private investigators because there's always a reason. We might not fully find the reason, but as you investigate, you start to see some of the factors that could come together. And as we talked, I discovered that she had worked in a health food shop for a day. She didn't get a break, so you know what she ate all day? Nuts. A whole pound of nuts all through the day. And then it was only about a week later, if she ate a nut, she'd swell. So here we are, a couple of years later, she said, I can't eat nuts. And I said, try one. Try one. So she had one. And it worked. Next day, she had 2. Can you see what you're doing? Most people aren't prepared to do that. I knew why she had an allergy, and if she has a whole cup of nuts today, she'll swell up, but she can have about 6. So it's the same thing with the legumes. Don't overdo it. It would be sad to get a nut allergy. They're so nice. Most people don't eat nuts for weeks and then get a bag of cashews and eat the whole lot in the afternoon. Is that right? That's when they can get an allergy. I'd be very sad if I had an allergy to cashews. What's a good idea to do is have legumes every day. And if you're not quite used to them, build yourself up slowly. Yes, rinse them very well. Yes, cook them well. And at the end of every meal, 8 to 10 nuts, that's a nice amount. And also add some seeds. There's your protein. Protein, the building blocks of the body. And the membrane around every cell is 50% protein, 50% fat. And that brings us to the third essential nutrient, which is fat. Udo Rasmus has written a book, Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. I love the title because there are killer fats. But because there are killer fats, all fats have been thrown out. So what are the best fats? Well, let's go back a couple of 100 years ago before heart disease became out of control. And let's look at the fats that people ate then. Well, it depended where you lived. If you lived in the tropics, it was coconut oil or palm oil, and no one was dying of heart attacks. And then we go to the Mediterranean, it was olive oil. No one was dying of heart attacks. And then we come further up the planet, it might have been some olive and it might have been some sunflower oil. And further up the planet, you're probably looking at more dairy, especially in those northern European countries, and no one was dying of heart attacks. And back then it was raw and it was organic. And then right up the top of the planet, it was probably seal, fish, whale, and no one was dying of heart attacks. The problem today with animal fats is there's hardly a one that hasn't been tainted with the chemicals coming through the drugs that they're given, the chemicals come through the sprays on the grass that were sprayed 6 months before they ate the grass, and then, 80% of antibiotics go to the animals. Personally, I choose to eat plants, and the two plant oils that have been used for centuries, so they've passed the test of time, is olive oil and coconut oil. And both of those oils are extracted from the flesh of the plant. So women could easily extract them in their kitchens. When the Industrial Revolution came, they now started to use high heat chemical equipment to extract oil out of hard seeds. Now when you go into the supermarket, one of the first things you see, these cheap vegetable oils in clear plastic bottles, they are the dangerous oils. Please don't touch them. It's better to spend a little bit more money and get extra virgin, first cold pressed olive oil. You'll find it in dark bottles because the light heat and oxygen can harm it. And we don't need much oil, but we do need a little bit. 50% of the membrane around every cell is fat. Except for the brain cell, it's 70% fat. When we looked at the heart, and I trust I convinced you that fat's not the problem. The problem is these new oils that have been extracted using heat, which actually totally destroys the structure of the oil. So there your good fats is the fats that come from foods and the fats taking a little bit, the olive and the coconut oil. They're the three essential nutrients. So the pregnant woman would do well for the development of her baby to eat this. A lady contacted me recently and she said, my little baby's only 5 months old and I can't eat wheat and I can't eat oats and I can't eat peanuts and I can't eat dairy. I don't know what to eat. I said, well, there's a lot of vegetables, there's a lot of fruits, and there's a lot of legumes, but I know what she's saying. She's eating what we looked at a couple of times is that high carbohydrate diet. Cereal and toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for tea, cereal and milk for breakfast with sugar. That is what many are eating. And when that's taken away, they say, well, what do we eat? Well, actually, there's a lot you can eat. There's a huge amount you can eat. It takes a little bit more work, and I think that's why a lot of people have gone to the high carbohydrate diet, because it's in every shop, it's just there, isn't it? It's just easy. But what's the old saying? Choose your hard. Yes, it's a little bit hard to do a bit of preparation. I love cooking, but I do not want to be in the kitchen all day, because I also love gardening. I also love doing other things. But I know, and I'll be looking at this tomorrow when I look at the mind, tomorrow I've got to think about tomorrow, today. Oh, I've got to soak my lentils overnight. Oh, I've got to put them in the crock pot in the morning, You make a little bit of pre-planning and you're not in the kitchen all day, I can assure you. And salad, that's easy. All you do is chop it up. Baked potatoes, baked sweet potatoes, chuck them in the oven, place them in the oven. So, yes, it takes legumes a little bit longer, but you just got to prepare early. How long does it take to pour some lentils into a saucepan, fill them with water before you go to bed? What, 1 minute? It's actually not a lot of time, it's just pre-thought. But when the lady starts to eat like this when she's pregnant, it's going to be easy when she has her baby. And pregnancy is not an illness, and birth is not an illness. And I believe that most births should be done at home. The only time there's a problem usually is when a woman has fear. So I had most of my babies at home. All my children grew up hearing great birth stories. In fact, I think it was my last 2 babies, the children watched their little brother and sister being born. It's a natural part of life. And so when my daughters had babies, there was no fear. Yes, it's hard work. And so they had their babies at home or in birthing centres. I have 25 grandchildren now, I think. 2 of them in this front row here. And I have 3 great-grandchildren. Can you see how we can pass it on? But when a girl grows up with scary birth stories, she's got this fear as she goes into labour. So it's very important to have a well-nourished body. It's very important to know about labour. And ideally, ladies, squat. Practice squatting early. And then the baby can be born without intervention, ideally. In fact, if a lady's going to labour, I say go in at the last minute. You see, I read a book about 2 years ago called The Midwife of Auschwitz. And this midwife was in her 50s, she was in the resistance, she was captured and sent to Auschwitz. And because she was a midwife, she delivered all the babies. She delivered 3,000 babies in 2 years. Never lost a baby. So what's happening in our hospitals? Because these women were suffering from the most severe form of malnutrition, in the most horrific environment, and she never lost a baby. One of the problems is intervention. Women are fearful and their bodies aren't well nourished, well stretched and well exercised. So the ladies should squat every day, they should get their bodies ready for labour, because a smooth, easy birth, that's a good start to life. And then when the baby's born, it's given the best environment. Please don't let anyone inject anything into your baby. If you're unsure, go to the pharmacist and look at what's in them. And if you're still unsure, the nurse or the doctor that does want to inject your baby, ask them to sign this piece of paper that they will be accountable. If there's any reaction, I doubt if any new baby would get an injection if that was so. Then the baby should be given the breast as early as possible. In the first half hour of birth, that's when the sucking process or the sucking reflex is the strongest. So put the baby on early. The first 3 days, the baby will get colostrum. I was talking to a dairy farmer and he said that if a cow dies when it's giving birth to a calf, he said we may as well put that calf down, because that calf, if it doesn't get that colostrum, that calf will be a sick calf. So it's very important to have that colostrum. In fact, the farmer said they even squeeze the teats from the dead cow to get that colostrum into that calf, or they try and find another cow that's just given birth to a baby. That's how important that colostrum is. That colostrum is very, very high in nutrients, in fats, That's high in fats for that developing brain, high in cholesterol, high in our microorganisms. So very important that the baby have that in the first 3 days of life. On the 3rd day, the milk comes in. Babies should be feeding like this. They should be feeding with their face to the breast, with their arms either side, because when the baby feeds like this, it drags on the nipple and the mother can get a sore nipple. If the mother gets a sore nipple, sometimes she will want to give up breastfeeding, but it is the best. There is no milk on the planet that equals the breast milk. And God made that milk perfect for every single age. So that's what babies should be getting. And ideally every 2 or 3 hours, that gives the mother's nipples a little break and also gives the baby's tummy a little break between meals. When should baby start eating food? 3 things have to be present for a baby to eat food. Number 1, the baby has teeth. Is that basic common sense? You know, there's been a death and no one attended the funeral because no one knew he died. It was the death of common sense. And Psalm 146 verse 3 says, "Put not your trust in princes, neither in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help." Who are the princes? They're the authorities in the field. Sometimes they get it wrong. When a woman breastfeeds, hormones are released that give her an inner sense of what is the best way to mother her baby. So the mother must never go against that inner sense. So the baby should have teeth. When do the teeth appear? Usually about 7.5 months. Very occasionally a little bit earlier, very occasionally a little bit later. There's no hard and fast rule. If I have learnt anything on my many years on this planet, it's never to be absolute. Got that? No baby's like your baby. Please don't compare it with other babies. Your baby is unique. And the best sign that your baby is getting enough is number 1, lots of wet nappies. One lady said, "But I can't measure the breast milk. Is my baby getting enough?" Well, just that very utterance tells me your worry can inhibit your milk supply. Trust. Do you remember the other night I showed you the difference between faith and fear? Have faith in this incredible body with its inbuilt ability to heal and to produce enough milk for your baby. So I was in Papua New Guinea 10 years ago. And I was talking to a lady before my meetings, and she was about 15. She had a baby on her hip, and I said, "Your baby?" She said, "Oh, a street girl." See, in Papua New Guinea, in the highlands, if a young 15-year-old girl falls pregnant, she's thrown into the street. So I took her baby, and I'm raising her baby. And that baby loved that woman. No one could touch that baby. And then I'm lecturing later and I turn around and the lady's breastfeeding that baby. I just stop staring and keep lecturing and, what's this? After the lecture I went straight up and I said, "You're breastfeeding the baby?" She said, "Yes." I said, "How so?" She said, "Well, I first got the baby, I was giving the baby formula, but every couple of hours I put the baby on the breast. I just kept putting the baby on the breast every couple of hours." She said it took about a month, but she said after a month I had enough milk and now I no longer give the baby formula. It's just breastfed. Now please feel free to relate that story. And that gives great hope to a woman that doesn't think she has enough milk. My daughter Emma, she's sitting in the front row here, she gave birth to twin girls 20 years ago and she breastfed them both. And she gave them no food till they were 16 months of age. But I remember Emma driving in the car, having this big gallon bottle of water and a tube and sucking water. She had to drink a lot of water. And those little 16 months old running around and they were only breastfed. You see, with breast milk, it's just demand and supply. The more you suckle, the more milk will be made. So whenever my babies had a fever, I knew it was important for them to be well hydrated, and usually I kept a break of 2 to 3 hours between meals, but when they had a fever, I just let them suckle all the time. And they suckled for comfort, but they were getting more liquid, because I knew that no matter how hot they got, if their brain was well hydrated, it would not convulse. And none of my babies convulsed. Mind you, if they got a little too hot, I'd put them in a tepid bath, not hot, not cold, and that would just bring the temperature down a bit. Do you know, we have lost common sense, isn't that true? You rush your baby with a fever to hospital, well, there's just been a car accident and Mum's having a cardiac arrest, your baby's going to be put on the back hold a little bit. And how much can you do at home, in the peace of your home, to just put that baby just sponge the baby down, just keep feeding the baby. Anyway, back to me feeding the baby like that for maybe 24 hours. And then the fever was gone, which they go. But oh dear, the next couple of days I had so much milk. Why did I have so much milk? Because the baby had suckled at the breast every hour. So if a woman feels that her supply is low, she can just put the baby on every half hour. Just let it suckle, just let it suckle, just let it suckle. And it's not forever, it's just to build up the supply. See, with breast milk, it's just demand and supply. The more the baby suckles, the more milk will be made. So if the baby has got lots of wet nappies, then the baby is getting adequate milk. You can't use size because some babies are slim, some babies are roly-poly, some babies are average. I know my sister, she had a baby, her second baby, she hardly ever had a roll of fat. She was just a slender baby, but she was happy, lots of wet nappies. And then her next baby was roly-poly. So you get different body types. And yet so often there's this rule stick, and it must be in that. If your baby's happy, if your baby's milestones are happening, if your baby has lots of wet nappies, your baby is getting adequate. So when can the baby have food? When the baby has teeth, and that will be about 7 months, 7.5. And the first teeth that come are 4 at the top and 4 at the bottom. And they're called milk teeth. And do you know why they're called milk teeth? Because that should be baby's main food, milk. Where do I get the name milk tooth? That's what they've been known for centuries. Milk teeth. So the baby should have some teeth. The baby should be able to sit. Because when we're going to eat, we need gravity to be able to digest properly. And the baby should be able to feed themselves. Got that? Feed themselves. When would that happen? Oh, about 5-6 months they're putting things in their mouth. They're not sitting usually till 7 to 7.5 months. And so what should be the first food? I was reading the report of one dentist. He said the worst food to give babies is soft food. And yet, isn't that what the princes tell everyone to do? Soft food? Why soft food? Oh, they might choke. Do you know babies don't choke, they gag? So let me tell you the difference between choking and gagging. So the first foods I gave my babies were a piece of cucumber. And they had maybe 2 teeth or 3 teeth, and they'd nibble, and bits of cucumber all over the tray, all over the floor. A few bits would go down. It's just taste time. They're getting the flavour, they're getting the ability to chew. They're like little rabbits, chew, chew, chew. It's just taste time. Maybe next meal, piece of apple. And by the time we've finished our meal, they're just about halfway through that piece. And sometimes a little bit gets caught, and they make a lot of noise, out it flies. That's gagging. And that gagging reflex is perfectly normal. But when a child has only ever had soft food, Everything's soft, everything's mashed, soft, soft, soft. And then when they're about 18 months and you give them a nut and they have one bite, swallow, gets caught, and it's quite silent, and their face is going blue, that's choking. So most children that choke, it's because they don't know how to chew. And they don't know how to chew because they've only ever given soft food. And so, when does more food get given? So we'll just write this down. So the first 8 are called milk teeth. And those milk teeth, they can come through anywhere between 7 and maybe 14 months. Little by little, they come through. So that's a period of time where they're tasting a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of this. But my son James was not interested in any food till he was 16 months old. And yet, lots of wet nappies. All these milestones are there. He's crawling and starting to walk and happy child. What did that tell me? All is good. But what some mothers are told today, that they must give their babies rice cereal 4 to 6 months of age. Have mothers heard this? Why? Well, the princes say that milk in the second 6 months doesn't have as much iron as in the first 6 months. Well, no, it doesn't. But have you seen how much a baby grows in the first 6 months compared to the second 6 months? They literally explode in the first 6 months. Whereas the second 6 months, yes, of course they grow, but not as fast a rate. In other words, the baby's need for iron in the second 6 months isn't as great as the baby's need for iron in the first 6 months. Getting back to common sense again, aren't we? And by the way, does God make mistakes? God never makes mistakes. That milk is perfect for that baby at every stage. And the mother does it because of this. Fear. Because the doctor says if you don't give your baby this cereal, your baby's brain won't develop, your baby's body won't develop. Well, do you know, sometimes the princes are wrong. Let's go back 200 years, 300, 500,000 years. Did you know babies didn't eat food? Did you know babies were breastfed sometimes till they were 3, 4 or 5? They didn't have blenders and all those machines that blend and grind everything up. No. The babies weren't fed food till they had teeth and could do it themselves. That's common sense. And one of the best things you can teach children is to be independent. And don't they want to do it by themselves? And so when my babies were up to the age of maybe about 12 months, I'd steam a bit of cauliflower, I'd steam a bit of broccoli, I'd steam a bit of carrot. This is if they were interested, James wasn't. And you know what happens? They pick it up, they see the colour, they feel the texture, and they can feel if it's too hot with their fingers, they won't put it in their mouth, and they taste what a carrot tastes like. They taste what a cauliflower tastes like and looks like, and the colour. They taste, can you see the different foods they're tasting? So they develop their tastes. So I remember my daughter Emma saying that she went into her son Daniel's room. He's 10 months old. He'd woken up, and he's up at the windowsill eating all the ladybugs. They're in the windowsill. There are a couple of sticky dead ones on his cheek. If you notice, they're not very fussy at that age, so how do they become fussy? You ever ask yourself? So when a mother says, my child is very fussy, I think, what happened? If you give a child a chocolate, are they going to want to eat an apple? No. If you give a child an ice cream, are they going to want to eat a bowl of salad? No. Do you know, we've got to come back to common sense. So if ever I gave my children a sweet, it was something that I made myself, and it was always after they'd eaten their meal. It was like a reward. You eat your salad? You eat your vegetables, you can have this. But if salad and vegetables are all they've ever eaten, you'll be surprised what children will eat when they're hungry. So now I'm going to give you the story of little Rosie. Little Rosie is a little girl we used to mind. She was only 2.5 and she would only drink fruit juice. That's all she'd drink. She was a thin little girl. She cried easily. Her parents had separated, so they were busy trying just to please her. And they said to me, that's all she'll have, is these little poppers, they were called. I said, oh yeah? And they left. So I said to my children, let's see if we can get Rosie out of this one. Hide the little backpack with all the poppers, take Rosie for a walk down to the creek, and we had a beautiful clear running creek, and get lots of water. No, make sure she's well hydrated, and don't bring her back till 2 o'clock because we had our main meal at 2. So they brought little Rosie back at 2. My William was the same age as her, then Peter was 5. They were like her little servants in waiting all day long. They ran round Rosie helping her. And so they came in the door and she said, Papa. And my children went, look, it's lunchtime. It was peer pressure at its best. Sat her down at the table and we're all smiling. We said grace and then everyone into it. And she looked around, looked at the food and she started to eat. And she ate and she ate because I think she was very hungry. And she ate a whole meal. And when her father came to pick her up, he picked up the bag. He was a bit puzzled because it was heavy, full of all her little fruit juices. But it's also an illustration of how you'll be surprised what children will eat when they're hungry. You'll be surprised what they will eat when you don't make a fuss of them. So the best thing for children is that they're just part of a crowd. You know what? They've come into the world and they've joined the family. They haven't come into the world and they're put on a pedestal and worshipped. That really destroys a child. So the first teeth are milk teeth, and that's what I call taste time. Give them little tastes. Some are interested, some are not. If they're interested, give them little tastes, but try just to give them 1, no more than 2 at a time. And then between 14 and probably 22 months of age, that's when the molars appear. And the molars are the grinders. And the grinders grind grain. And what do we use to grind grain? We use a salivary amylase called ptyalin. And ptyalin is not present in the mouth in large amounts until the molars are through. Do you know what that means? Children should not be given this rice cereal. If they're given rice cereal when they're 5 to 6 months of age, they can't break it down. Because there's certainly no salivary amylase in the stomach, as we saw the other day. The only enzyme in the stomach breaks down protein. These salivary and also pancreatic amylases that break down starch, they are not present until the molars are through. And what we find is that many children are suffering with gut problems, absorption problems, because they've given starch too early. And I was reading the account of this dentist. He says the reason why jaws aren't developing properly, teeth aren't developing properly, the roof of the mouth's not developing properly, because people aren't eating crunchy food. Children should be eating crunchy food. And what the crunchy food does when they're young is develops the crunch, the chewing habit, which they will take with them all through life. That's why if the child's hungry and it's not quite mealtime and it's breakfast, because we do fruit at breakfast, give them an apple. Don't peel it, don't core it, just give them an apple. And how many people core it, peel it, or they might choke? Do you know, they're not stupid. Isn't that true? And when you give them an apple, oh, they are so proud that they've been given a whole apple that they can eat by themselves. They'll work it out. Yeah, a few bits of peel might come off, but if they're hungry, they'll be able to get into there. And if it's lunchtime and they're hungry and lunch isn't quite ready, I give them a carrot. It takes a child a long time to get through a carrot. And that's all they've had is a carrot, so when you do serve lunch, they'll eat. I first started to give my children their main meal at lunchtime. I've got a photograph of James, my second child, at the age of 3, with his pyjamas on and his head down, sound asleep, next to his evening meal, plate of food. The best meal of the day, and he's fallen asleep. So that's when I started to give the main meal at lunchtime. Their dad wasn't happy, and I said, it's just easier for me, it's better for the kids, and I can warm it up for you at night. Well, he started to eat the main meal with us at lunch. But when children are going to school, that is not really possible to do. So what I suggest, because the old adage that we should eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a queen, and supper, nearly said tea, it's supper, isn't it? I'm in the US. Supper like a pauper. Yes, sometimes paupers don't eat. Lunch like a queen, yes, and sometimes the king and the queen eat the same amount. And supper is light. So if supper is taken, it should be light. Pauper. And what I have found, that children are so much happier when you don't feed them all day long, because they've got gastrointestinal tracts just like us, and their stomachs need a break between meals. So I only ever fed my children, even my little ones, at the meal table. So when my little ones were, say, 18 months, by 18 months, they've got all their teeth, so now they're eating a balanced meal. So what would they eat? High fibre, generous protein, great fats. I never made special food for children or babies. Well, the fact was that I didn't feed my babies solid food. So by the time they've got all their teeth and they're eating a lot more food at the meal times, I might breastfeed them when they woke up. I might breastfeed them when they were maybe at about 11 o'clock, and they would go down for a sleep, and then they'd wake up and I'd give them a little bit of water or sometimes another breastfeed, and then we'd have our main meal. So I found that the little one that you might think can't go the distance, they're having a sleep late morning, and so that does allow them to go the distance. And I remember one day Peter used to get upset at the meal table. Say at breakfast, if the banana fell in the honey, he'd cry. And the rule was, if the children cried, they had to go outside. They couldn't make a fuss at the table. In fact, when we sit to eat, it should be a pleasant, calm environment. And I remember one day I had to send Peter out about 4 times, because then his spoon fell in the wrong part of the porridge. And then, I don't know, the banana fell in the wrong place or something like this. Do you know Peter now is a master craftsman? So this fussiness about his breakfast, he's now taken into his craft, and he's a highly sought after craftsman. So don't despair, parents. Sometimes those very frustrating character traits can actually prove to be a great blessing. But the rule was you couldn't stay at the table if you were going to fuss or if you were going to cry. And I remember I used to go to the door and say, "Are you going to be a good boy now?" "No." "Okay, shut the door." And we had our meal. A few minutes later, "Are you going to be a good boy now?" "Oh, I'm so glad. Come in." When you treat your children politely, they will treat you politely. And if ever they don't, I would immediately say, "Excuse me, What did you say? You immediately take them to task. It cannot be. It cannot be. And then we'd start again. So it got to the point where he's 3 now and still crying at these things. I said, if you don't cry for the first 10 minutes of your breakfast, you can sprinkle carob powder on your porridge. So he tried very hard. Very hard not to cry when the banana fell in the honey. But sometimes he'd have to leave so much that he didn't get a lot of breakfast eaten, and I'd think, I'm going to have trouble with Peter. He's going to be hungry in a few hours. And so, say 10 o'clock, Mum, I'm hungry. Okay, have some water. Have some salt. Often that can hold them. 12 o'clock, I'm hungry. You sit very still because you had a lot of water. You can have half a glass of organic soy milk. So for a little 3-year-old, that'll squash the hunger pangs. And now it's 1:30, we're having lunch at 2. I'm hungry. All right, if you sit very, very still, you can have a carrot. And you say it as if it's the greatest honour. All right, you can have a carrot. I would not give him food at 10, because then he's not going to be wanting to eat his main meal. And then if he doesn't eat a proper meal, then he's going to be hungry again. Can you see you've got to go ahead? And tomorrow, in my lectures on the mind, I'm going to show you the part of the brain where foresight is, looking ahead. Because you've got to be one step ahead of them. Because they will sometimes try and run rings around you. And so when the teeth are all fully through, then they start really to just eat the same food as you. I didn't do anything different to what I ate. But I always started with raw food because I found that that's the part of the meal that the children usually don't want to eat. They want to go straight to the porridge at breakfast or the toast. And at lunchtime, they want to go straight to the potatoes and the lentils and the cooked food. It's the raw food that they are least likely to eat. And so that's what I would serve first. And I noticed at lunchtime today, my daughter served her 2 little ones a plate of salad and some olives and some tomatoes. And they ate it all because they knew that they weren't going to get any of the baked potatoes or the red lentils with all the good stuff in it until they'd eaten their salad. And then there is no fuss. And also at breakfast time, you serve the fruit first. And when they've eaten the fruit, then they can start to have the others. With some children, they'll happily eat it all, but rather than make a fuss at the table, I usually do it like that. So when I first married Michael, Michael's a bachelor. He was a bachelor for many years. And as a bachelor, he was eating cereal and toasted breakfast sandwiches for lunch, pasta for tea. Well, actually, he had his main meal at lunch, so it was pasta and sandwiches at lunchtime. And so I knew that he and his 2 children were not used to having much raw food. So I knew I had to come in carefully. And so at breakfast time, I'd just serve the big fruit salad with a nut cream and sprinkles like chia and ground flax. And Michael and his children would sit down and they'd look at the food and you'd see them thinking, is this it? Is this all we're going to eat now? And Michael would say, is there any porridge? I said, almost ready. And the children are hungry, haven't fed them since yesterday. So they eat, and when it's almost or half gone, then I bring the porridge out. And I do the same at lunchtime. They sit down and there's a couple of bowls of salad and make them delicious, make them crisp. Have some delicious dressings there. Just your basic lemon and olive oil and crushed garlic and salt, and to make it creamy you could put a bit of tahini in there. So, or maybe mashed avocado, that's really nice with garlic and lemon. So we sit down and you could see their eyes again looking. Is this it? Michael would say, "Are there any potatoes?" "Almost ready." They're almost ready. So they're hungry. They haven't eaten for 5.5 hours. They eat the salad. When it's half gone, "Oh, potatoes are ready. Oh, the lentils are ready." Do you know, he said to me years later, he said, "I never realised what you were doing." Do you know, his little girl, Michaela, was 11, and she had quite a tummy on her because of this high carbohydrate diet they were eating. And in 1 month, she was slender. She was eating well, but they were eating almost 100% carbohydrates. You see, Michael can cook toast. That's it. He can cook toast. And his daughter Michaela at 11, she was doing the cooking. So it was just all pasta and porridges and high carbohydrates. Because digestion requires a peaceful environment at the table, that it's important for the cook of the home to be mindful of such things. So as the child grows, a lot of people are worried because many children are quite slim. And I have a friend who's a paediatrician, and she gets parents coming to her complaining that their child is underweight, too skinny. She says, "Your child is normal." There are so many children today that are overweight. Just stand by even just a primary school and just look at the size of the children that are going in. And it's alarming how many children are overweight today. And one of the reasons they're overweight is there's not a lot of activity. So it's very important that there be rules on the home on technology. A lady said to me, every year at Christmas time, like in a cul-de-sac, like it's just a little, the road goes nowhere, there's houses in this half circle. Every year the children come out and they show off their new bicycle, their skateboard, skates, whatever it is. She said, this year no one came out. Where are they? Thumbs. It's very sad. And there was a newspaper article and the front page said, children can't jump anymore. So I was intrigued, what's this article about? But of course it's catchy to catch your attention, so you'll read it. That they're finding that children's bones and muscles are not developing because they're spending too much time on technology. So their bones and their muscles aren't developing, and the bones and the muscles that develop in childhood basically are going to take us through adulthood. Did you know what the Russian standards are? These are the Russian standards on technology for children. I think it's under the age of 2, 0 exposure to technology. And how many adults give them to the children to keep them quiet? And do they keep them quiet? Oh yes, until you try and take them off them. Then the quietness you've had for two hours explodes in the next 10 minutes, is that right? So and at the age of 5 minutes. By the age of 10, 15 minutes a day. By the age of 15, I think it's half an hour a day. By the age of 18, maybe 2 hours a day, sort of school stuff. Would that be what's happening in America? Not at all. Not at all. So we're getting a lot of children who are getting addicted to this technology, and it's also harming their brains for a few reasons. Their skull is not as thick as ours, so the electromagnetic field from the devices goes in deeper, and it's also the content, and it's also the glazingness, which is almost like hypnosis of these children being fixed to this technology. But the other problem is that their bodies aren't moving. And I was talking to an optometrist, and she said to me, we are finding that children's eyes are deteriorating far too young. She said that by the age of 11, the short and long range muscles in the eye are set. But she said today children are getting too much short range and not enough long range. And so that's affecting this setting of these long and short range muscles by the age of 11. One old doctor said to a friend of mine, he'd be dead now because this was 10 years ago and he was 90 then, he said, "We need to spend more time gazing at the mountains." So if your job is on technology, please every hour go and gaze at the clouds for 5 minutes. Go and glaze. If there's no mountains, and you've got beautiful mountains with white tops, I can't stop looking at them. I'm not used to snow-capped mountains. If there's no mountains, look at the tops of the trees, look at the clouds. And did you see a red sky tonight? Red sky at night, shepherd's delight. I do hear sunshine sometimes here in Idaho. We're looking forward to it tomorrow. So all of this are things that we need to think about today that no generation on the planet has ever thought about. A lady said to me, "My little girl, she's 7 and she's allowed half an hour on my phone on Sunday morning. But she said every time I turn around through the week, she's got the phone." I said, "It's real easy. Every time she picks up your phone through the week, she loses 5 minutes on Sunday morning. Spell it out to her very clearly. Sunday morning comes, 'I'm ready, Mum.' 'Sorry, sweetheart, you've used it all up.' If there's a fuss, all you say is, 'Well, if you continue fussing, it'll be another week.'" You see, it's a powerful thing to use choice with children. Give them the choice. You don't say to a child, what do you want for breakfast? You know what you say to the child? "Would you like pear or banana on your porridge?" There's the choice. "For the salad, would you like the avocado dressing or the tahini salad dressing on your salad?" There's the choices. It's like my son, his new partner had a little girl. My son's never had little girls, he's only got boys. And they were going out and this little girl was 7 and she didn't know whether to wear this dress or that dress. He's never heard of such a thing. So he went in, he picked 2 dresses out and said, "Which one?" When you give them a choice, they feel they have power over the situation. And so that's also an easy way to avoid confrontation. And at all, as much as possible, we should avoid confrontation. But sometimes there is confrontation, and that's when I think the best way, and I've trained my children this, is just cause and effect. There's a consequence for every action, and they choose. And that's why it's important to let them know. I think you can talk too much, but there's a consequence for every action. That's why I found my children behave very nicely at the table, because what did they know? That if they didn't, they would have to leave the table. And when you only feed them twice a day, and when you feed them 5 hours apart, they're hungry. And if you notice that children say, when they say they're starving, they're actually usually thirsty or they're bored. Because they don't really know what starving is, isn't that true? And also when you realise that those 3 essentials, the digestion of those 3 essentials takes 3.5 to 4 hours. So often that hunger pang that is experienced by adults and children alike is actually thirst. And they love salt. So I'd say to my grandchildren, when you drink a half glass of water, you can have a little bit of salt and then the other half glass of water. And I say to my grandchildren in the morning, "Have you watered your garden yet?" The garden down here. Sometimes they come in and they say, "Grandma, we've watered our garden." I say, "I'm so pleased. You're ready for breakfast." And then they help with the breakfast. Do you know, when you deprive children of work, you deprive them of the joy of accomplishment. And they love helping, and they love helping when they're here. And you'll notice that the child never comes into the room at 10 or 11 and says, "Well, I've decided to work now." No, it should be just part of their life. It's very important with training children with child nutrition to have this authority in the home so that your word is listened to. Because if it's not, you're not going to get them to eat anything good. And also, and remember, you're always kind, you're always fair, but there's always a consequence. And it's very important for the children to know what the guidelines are in the home. And I remember one of my daughter-in-law came to me and she said, I was going to have her little one, the 3-year-old, she said, we have discovered he needs to eat every 2 hours. I said, oh, that's interesting. And she left. I gave him a good-sized breakfast, millet, the other children were there, and honey and organic soy milk and chopped banana on top, and they love the sprinkles, and then a slice of sourdough toast and avocado and lentils like Pa and Grandma. I can assure you they're not wanting food for a long time after that. And then they're playing all morning, and you make sure you give them water, and you smile the whole time, here's water. I don't want water. Oh, I'm so sad you won't be able to have lunch. See, smile the whole time. Do you know, when you smile, you tell the child, I love you. You see that? When a parent gets angry with a child and yells at a child, you know what the message is? I don't like you. But you will find if the parent is well, or the adult is well hydrated, well slept, well fed, their emotions calm down. And there was one question there, you'll notice the link between diet and mental health. Absolutely, we're going to look at that tomorrow. But you'll find that the parent will have more control, more calm. And we'll also look at that aspect tomorrow. And then if the child makes a fuss, oh, sorry, so sorry you've chosen to go outside for the meal. Shut the door. And if they kick the pot plant off the veranda, they pick the pot plant up. Yeah, smile. Can I come back in? Oh, when you've picked the pot plant up. Go. What if they cut their finger? They'll be more careful next time. You've got a Band-Aid ready. See, it's just cause and effect. This is how they learn. And as you'll find out tomorrow, this is how you strengthen intellect, by strengthening common sense in a child. And how you strengthen common sense is get them to think for themselves. And I remember I was at Emma's once, and her little boy Seth, I think he was about 5, and he had to take the compost up to the chook pen. And he picked it up and said, it's too heavy. Have you noticed how they act? So Emma said, well, just do 3 steps with this arm and 3 steps with the other arm. Now, if the adult says, I'll take it for you, sweetheart, do you know what they've just said? You're hopeless. Oh, but I'm just trying to help them. You're not. They acted. You have a look. That compost bin is not near as heavy as that rock that they picked up, and they're so proud they picked up the rock. You know, it's twice as heavy as the compost bin. Have you noticed? Have you noticed? So these are simple things, and they're guidelines. My husband and I did a parenting course, and if you Google Self-Heal by Design, you can download our 6-part parenting course. We start with the relationship between mum and dad, which is vital. Then we look, I think, at birth to a year, and then we look at childhood, then we look at adolescence, teenage years, then we look at single parenting, and then we look at grandparenting, something like that. Anyway, it's about 6 series, so it goes for about 6 hours. And we explore all of these in much more detail, because we're alarmed at how many unhappy homes there are today. And it's usually because children are given too free a range, allowed to eat whenever they want, allowed to do whatever they want, and it's not a happy home. Children are very happy when they know exactly where the guidelines are in the home. But it all starts with proper nutrition, as I showed you. As a baby, keeping routine. I discovered very early that children love routine. They love doing the same things at the same time every day because their body gets used to that. And so I trust you've enjoyed child nutrition, and I trust you were a little surprised that we went in a few areas other than food, because it's all part of raising children. We're going to have a short break now at 7 o'clock, so we'll come back at 7:10 and we're going to look at hormones.